Welcome back to Inside City Hall. As we've been telling you, it's election eve here in New York and in many states around the country. And with Governor Cuomo holding a seemingly commanding lead, much of the conversation has turned to a down-ballot drama between the governor's newly created Women's Equality Party and the Working Families Party. Meanwhile, in non-campaign news, Mayor de Blasio and Police Commissioner Bill Bratton held an unusual press conference at Gracie Mansion yesterday to forcefully respond to a New York Post front-page story about the abrupt departure of a high-ranking police official, Chief of Department Phil Banks. We've got four top political strategists here to talk about this. We've got Republican consultants Leticia Remauro and Richard St. Paul, and Democrats Alexis, Grenell, and Bob Liff. Good to see everybody. Thanks for coming in.
Good to see you.
And we asked you to grade the mayor's handling of this whole situation in yesterday's press conference. I take it you would not have advised him to do it.
I would not. I gave him an F, and I'm usually a little lenient, and I take my Fs seriously, but really this was just F'd up. And I mean, in reality, here's the problem with this mayor. This mayor would like to have a progressive New York, but New York isn't progressive. We're a moderate, climate, and he hasn't gained the trust of the people. I think Phil Banks leaving was basically saying that we're not handling this right, Mayor de Blasio. I don't agree with this administration. He's trying to shove it down our throats, this progressive movement, and I think it's backfiring. It's one after the other misstep, and I think what he needs to do is he needs to connect and get trust with the people, and then maybe he can introduce polarizing personalities like Al Sharpton into our government, and Charlene, not that she's polarizing, but what is her role?
Okay, an interesting question. Alexis, your grade.
Sure, I give it a B+. I agree with Leticia that it would have been better not to have had the press conference. But if you're going to have the press conference, the person who came out smelling like a rose was the commissioner. He seemed commanding. There was separation between him and City Hall, and he spoke to his ranks, which seemed like something that needed to happen. And it's not a disaster. The problem is it shouldn't have happened in the first place, because if he had addressed it sideways as opposed to head on, he could have accomplished the same thing without the sort of next day stories and all the linking and all the blogs.
How do you handle it sideways?
Have an event with the police commissioner, go do something else, and then take a question about the Post story and, laugh it off if you want. If you want to say, look, I can't really respond to unsourced stories that are front page with unnamed sources, move on.
I thought the thing to do would be to have the mayor and his wife, the commissioner and his wife, out at dinner, and you sort of let the press know. That's
exactly.
what you come at it sideways. And then you show that they're all drinking wine and breaking bread, and say, oh, by the way, that Post story is ridiculous.
Exactly, and let the Daily News do the work, because you know what? The tabloid wars will wage themselves. The Daily News today ran Charlene's entire rebuff in the editorial section. They will carry the weight. The mayor doesn't have to.
It's something they didn't seem to understand, that as they were complaining about it, it's kind of like, there's this free press, and if the Post is wrong, believe me, the Daily News will be first in line to point it out.
I gave the mayor an I incomplete. I think we'll finally settle this quote-unquote controversy on Wednesday, when we were supposed to announce who the new commissioner is. And it looks, new second in command is, which it looks like it's going to be Commander Nelson out of Brooklyn South, who's an African-American. But here's what really the point is. There's 2 points. One, this just outlays the issues that the mayor has had in his communication department. I mean, he still doesn't know how to communicate with the media and get his story out and get it right. Second issue is, what is the role of the First Lady of New York City? I mean, what is she? Is she hiring or firing people? We still don't know. Her chief of staff, she has a chief of staff who's been in the news, but we still don't know what the role of the First Lady is. And here, he needs to define, or the office of the mayor, or she needs to define what her role is, whether or not she should have been part of this story.
Well, he said she's his partner and most trusted advisor.
But she has her office, and she's supposed to do something, so what's your role here? That doesn't say much.
I take it you're saying, what was her role in this NYPD controversy?
And what's her role going forward? Is she going to have a role? I mean, apparently she has her own office, so she's have to have a role somewhere. Is she supposed to do something? Is she going to be like the First Lady of this country, Michelle Obama, where she's looking at health and
pick a couple of issues and run with those? Well, it seems, I think that ship has sailed. I think she's doing a lot more than just that.
You're right.
I gave him an A because the question was, how did he handle it? And I disagree with Alexis. He handled it directly, and he handled it up front, and he handled it on the first day, which I always think is a good idea. We're talking about the Puzzle Palace. We're talking about One Police Plaza. It's, pardon my mixing my metaphors, it's the College of Cardinals with a bunch of yentas. And
I thought you were going to say the Kremlin.
No, it's no.
Who's sitting next to who?
Well, that's right. I mean, there's all kinds of theories that you know, Kelly planted a time bomb by putting these people in, knowing that Bratton would have to deal with this. You know, there is the racial overlay and the ethnic overlay of the fact that you had an African-American chief of department and you had a Hispanic first deputy. Those two people are gone. The clear implication is that he is going to appoint a minority as the first deputy. There's a lot of policy issues, how, you know, and under various commissioners, the chief of department did report to the first deputy, under others it didn't. So, but I think that this is a combination of the kind of incestuous puzzle palace bizarreness that goes on within one police plaza, and there's some press politics involved as well.
But the problem is, no, the public doesn't actually care about that.
Right.
And you and I know all about that, and everyone here can talk a lot about it, but people reading the paper don't care about who Commissioner Bratton's first deputy as chief of department is. They care about crime. And so making this a story and addressing it head on turned what was really inside baseball into front page news for the public that doesn't care about it.
That's what the public is reading into right now. They're taking a good look at the mayor's overall philosophy, his overall administration, what he's doing and how he's handling crime, and a lot of questions about what's going on are arising. More questions than answers.
I think that de Blasio and Bratton have worked together very closely in the Eric Garner case and a whole series of cases that could have blown up in other times. No, I don't have to. I don't have to exclude Sharpton. Excuse me. And that the mayor has backed up the police commissioner in all of the controversies. The police commissioner has backed up the mayor in all of these controversies, and they have stood together. So I think that some of this kind of cartoon quality of Bill as this raving leftist who wants to, you know, take us back to the bad old days is a little bit of a cartoon that's not fair.
Absolutely. I think the point, though, is that what we all agree is that the press conference perhaps amplified a message that wasn't in the mayor's best interest. Even as the commissioner and the mayor, the mayor and the commissioner, to get their facts straight, wanted to address this issue head on. And of course, when it deals with a spouse, it's very personal, and that can be very hard for an executive. But perhaps addressing it differently might have accomplished the same goal.
But again, this won't be the last time we see this happening. Again, since the First Lady's office is not defined, if she makes a statement on some other policy, it will make news again.
Absolutely.
Well, this is true. They're gonna probably. Well, I suspect this is not the last we've heard of this sort of controversy, because whoever their opponents are, and I think there's a real interesting story to be told about the deep opposition within the NYPD to both the commissioner and to City Hall, and they seem to be.
Rank and file. We need to talk about that.
I wonder when they have time to protect the city. They're so busy leaking to the New York Post and other places. We got some more politics to talk about.
That's the puzzle palace. That's not the line office.
We will be back in just a second with these fine consultants. Stay with us.
And they say we're lazy. You show them the biggest vote in history by getting out your vote and your family's vote and your neighbor's vote, and we're taking this state forward.
Welcome back to Inside City Hall. We're talking with the four members of our Monday Consultants Corner: Republicans Leticia Remauro and Richard St. Paul, Democrats Alexis Grenell and Bob Liff. So there's the governor. You'd almost think there was an election at hand, right? He finally decided to sort of get out and campaign. That was him at a big rally in Times Square. I know that you are working on the Astorino campaign.
Yep.
And what's the plan? What's the sort of the closing argument?
Well, look, the plan is to get people out to vote who would like to get rid of Common Core, who want to see this economy actually be great. And those are folks, especially upstate, who have had issues finding jobs, and casinos aren't going to do it. Here in the downstate, your folks who support charter schools are going to support Astorino. Folks who don't support Common Core are going to support Astorino. Now, there is one issue that, as we saw earlier, there is women have been a significant issue in this campaign, and just for the Republican Party in general. So that is a concern. But for the Astorino, it is to get a lot of people, especially upstate and in Long Island, to support him. And if that happens, we think we'll get 30% in the city. If that happens, we may have a surprise tomorrow.
Okay, very good. Well, that is a scenario that we will be watching for. Let's talk about the race on Staten Island. Leticia Remauro, former chair of the Republican Party on Staten Island. Did you think Michael Grimm would have a 19-point lead going into the election?
I have to tell you something. I think, I predicted, I think early on that I thought that Grimm was going to be the winner of this race. And it's no surprise. It's no surprise at this stage in the game that lead is so wide, because the fact of the matter is Michael Grimm, understands his constituency and has made a personal connection to his constituency. And now that constituency is surrounding him and really, giving him their support. On the other hand, Dominic Recchia never learned to speak the language of Staten Island, and I'm sorry, but lately he's not speaking any language that anybody understands. I'm sorry, it's just true. So Michael Grimm, I think, is really, he did everything right, and Dominic has done everything wrong.
I think Michael Grimm, who I think is a disgrace, has both as a congressman and frankly as a human being, has made a very interesting argument, which was elect me, and if I get convicted, you get to vote again. It's I've never heard that argument made.
Well, it seems to be a successful argument. I think he would put it more like, constitutional right to due process, but your point is well taken.
If I have to leave office, then you get to vote for Dan for Dan.
I asked him, will you resign if you get convicted? And he gave actually sort of a bit of a hedge on that, actually. Said, if I'm unable to serve, which is not quite the same thing as saying...
Well, he maintains his innocence, and,
he is innocent. No, he is innocent until the court says otherwise.
This will be the first time an elected official has been indicted and gone to trial and been, adjudicated of all charges. So there's, in America, we got to learn. This is a lawyer. There's a lawyer. Let me tell you, as a lawyer, you're guilty, you're innocent until you're proven guilty.
I think it's interesting, though, because obviously he's not really the candidate many Republicans wanted either. And he's not an ideal candidate. In fact, he's, has a lot of drawbacks, and I think that there were other people in the roster waiting to run. And what's really interesting is that there was no primary. Why was there no primary?
He is getting the help of his frenemies. They would just as soon see him get reelected, and then if there's a special election, just as you say, it's like, well, let's take another look at this.
Maybe that's what's going to happen.
Well, I think at the end of the day, here's the thing. Dominic Recchia never told Staten Island what he was going to do for them, and that's a real problem. I mean, Staten Island is used to fighting for everything that it gets, and Michael understands that, and Michael has represented the island well, especially during Hurricane Sandy. So, when you lead a campaign with 20 count indictment over and over again and never actually say what you're going to do, I'm sorry, he's got nothing to back him up.
The other thing is, Recchia just couldn't get a hold of the issues. He couldn't talk about it. I mean, all politics are local, so if you're in Staten Island and Brooklyn, people are really paying attention to what's going on there. And so if you can't talk about national issues, you got a big problem.
Right.
And that's why you see this 19-point lead here.
Right, and fundamentally also just being a Democrat, not from Staten Island, running on Staten Island is an uphill battle.
That is true.
Absolutely.
But it was tighter. It was tighter until recently, after that last debate here. Thanks to New York 1.
Yes, actually,
19 points.
Do we have a clip of the debate? It was one of the more interesting ones, actually, because there were some surprises, and you don't usually get surprises. Normally, people are going to sort of step through their talking points, and I asked a couple of lightning round questions.
debate was not very exciting.
And you ask a couple of questions, and they kind of go in different directions that you don't necessarily expect. And I thought it was good. I mean, I talked with some of the people who were at the debate, and I think they sort of felt satisfied that a lot of different issues had come forward that they weren't necessarily expecting to hear.
Absolutely. You got a lot of questions asked and answered, and I think that it really did cinch in people's minds what they wanted to do. And I think that at the end of the day, Staten Islanders want somebody that understands that we have tolls that are killing our jobs, and Michael sued the Port Authority, and we now have lower tolls.
Here's a little piece from the debate.
So my opponent has a history of tax and spend. That's what he's been, that's what he will be, and that's all he will ever be.
Your campaign is in debt. You are indicted because you do not know how to run a business. You should be the last one to give any type of advice on business.
Oh, I hear deep sighs on the Democratic side of the table. Why is that? You think Recchia could have been a better candidate?
I wish he had been a better candidate. And to my colleague's point, you have to run a local race, but also there's some things that you can do to sort of improve your delivery of your issues. And unfortunately, I think that Grimm presents well. Right. He's grim underneath on the substance, but he presents really well.
What about the idea that, with all of those great Jimmy Siegel television ads, and I thought Recchia's ads were powerful, could he have just kind of stayed home and let the ads run?
It's not enough. Certainly not with, it's too local.
This is Strong Island. I mean, these people, this is a community here that are very much into local politics, So no, you can't do that.
I will
You gotta
say
be on the ground.
DNC came in and they said, we're going to use our cookie cutter negative campaigning, and this is what's going to turn Staten Island on. Wrong. You've got to know and speak our language if you want, our vote.
And the air wars are fighting, is what we're doing with ISIS. We're dropping bombs. Those are the air wars.
Right.
When you troops on the ground, that's Grimm. He's troops on the ground.
Right, people show up. They expect to see their candidates knocking on the door, talking to them from one-to-one, and making the case to them directly.
An interesting
and
number.
He's from Staten Island.
An interesting number that came out of our poll, in fact, was that when asked who was running the more negative campaign, by a fairly substantial margin, people said that it was Recchia. And the fact that he's also 19 points behind suggests, if you connect the dots, they saw the negative campaigning, they decided who it was coming from, and they didn't like it. Right. We're going to leave it there for now. Thank you all so much for coming by. I'm going to be back in just a minute with a preview of our special election night coverage tomorrow. We got a lot of stuff going on. Stay with us.